present the Bored Cyborg! The Bored Cyborg! I have truly run out of intros. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and we about to film. Welcome back to yet another episode. Today I am bringing you the long-awaited, at least by a few of you, top 10 films from 1993. This one's for you, Mjolnir. I hate that it's been months and months and months since I've done a video in this series where I basically started with my birth year, 1988, and have done my top 10 films plus 5 honorable mentions for each year, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, and today we're doing 93. I'd love to know what your favorite films from 1993 looked like. Feel free to do a top 10, a top 12, a top 11, whatever suits you. I'd love to read and see all the eclectic, diverse lists that you guys always bring, so feel free to leave that down in the comments below. We get a little discussion. Roll! Let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. Today's stand is going to be 2 random VHS. One called Beartooth and one called Steel Sharks with Billy D. Williams and Gary Busey. Oh, and I have a Patreon, so if you guys like what I do and want to support the channel with monies, feel free to check that out. I appreciate all the support, whether it's monetary or not. Thank you all. Alright, so let's jump into the 5 honorable mentions. I love all of these films. 1993 was a very nostalgic year for me. I was 5, 6 years old, and a lot of these movies mean a lot to me, more than words. It's ineffable. It's a very visceral experience watching a lot of these movies. Brings me right back, snaps me back to my childhood, and it's a nice place to wallow and relax for a little while. You guys know me. Nostalgia definitely influences my picks for these lists. Let's jump in. Cool Runnings, man! Feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme. How about I draw a line down your head and make it look like a butt? Oh, I could quote this forever. Cool Runnings stars John Candy and a quartet of unbelievable actors who play the 4-man Jamaican bobsled team. The first Jamaican bobsled team. This movie was so cultured and flavorful when I was a kid. It was you know, taking Jamaica and bringing it to, what was it, Nagano. It was such a cool 90s concept. A couple of the guys on the bobsled team, one was Dougie Doug, who you guys would know, very, very popular in the 90s, as well as Leon, who was one of the henchman villains in Cliffhanger, actually. And so, Cool Runnings is just an awesome movie about this, a bunch of, you know, broke kids from Jamaica who have these specific set of skills. They try to make their way into the Olympics. Again, I believe it was the Nagano Olympics, where they would become the first Jamaican bobsled team. So it's a really fun sports kind of movie. It's a comedy. It's Disney, of course. And I'm really glad Disney released these on Blu-ray. Glad to have this. Love John Candy. Love the cast here. Love the music by Hans Zimmer. Love Cool Runnings. Jamaica's got a bobsled team! Next up is another nostalgic one. You guys know how much I love this film and how nostalgic I am for it. That is Super Mario Brothers. I love Super Mario Brothers. The movie, I saw it when I was a kid. It swept me away. I knew it had nothing to do with the game. I didn't give a shit. This was the first of its kind in 93, the first video game movie, and they haven't had too good of a track record since then, to be quite honest, but it is what it is. I think this was a good start. It was a big budget Hollywood movie with big actors and big special effects budgets, and directed by Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, who created Max Headroom a few years earlier for HBO, and they got their first directing job with Super Mario Brothers. It was a disaster on set. I've actually been to a showing where some of the cast was discussing, nobody super famous, but some of the cast was discussing how crazy it was behind the scenes and how drunk everybody was, and it just adds to the lore, to the mythos of what Super Mario Brothers the movie is for cinema. And it is something that we'll never see again. It was a risk taken by Hollywood. I love it. I wish it had Mario music in it, sort of orchestral. That would have been really cool, but the music is fine. Otherwise, I really love this movie. I watch it once a year. It just transports me back to the 90s and makes me feel like a kid. I think Bob Hoskins and Leguizamo are great, even though they were intoxicated most of the shooting. That is Super Mario Brothers. My second honorable mention. Next up, is Demolition Man on this 3-pack with Over the Top and Tango the Cash. What a 3-pack. What a badass machismo-laden 3-pack. Demolition Man is awesome. Demolition Man is sort of the complement to Schwarzenegger's Last Action Hero. Last Action Hero, I think, is a better deconstruction of the action movie genre up to that point. But Demolition Man, I have to sneeze. One moment. I don't have to sneeze. Demolition Man starts up with Stallone breaking into this giant warehouse to take down this bad guy played by Wesley Snipes, but he ends up cryogenically frozen and wakes up, I don't know, 30 years into the future, 40 years into the future, where everything is neutered and pacified and everything is peaceful because it's a super authoritarian, weird, super liberal state. And so it's one of those fish out of water sort of stories with Stallone, who comes into this world, you know, he's this street cop and he curses and he handles things with violence, and this future is very far removed from all of those ideas. So it's a very cool social commentary, political commentary, and just a badass action movie that reminds me a lot of Batman and the Joker. Wesley Snipes is perfect in this role, and I would have loved to seen him play Joker in the 90s. I think he would have nailed it. I think the cat and mouse between him and Stallone in this is very Batman-like. I love Demolition Man. Marco Brambilla is Brambilla is the director. Badass action movie from 9-3. Demolition Man. The next honorable mention is Falling Down. And I do own Falling Down on DVD. It's in my pile of movies that I'm sort of going through, my research pile, movies that I'm watching, etc. So I'm not digging that out, but I do have it on DVD. I definitely need to upgrade. I love Falling Down. Again, a biting political satire almost. It's more of a political commentary about, working class people getting the shaft. And that's something that most of us could relate to in 2020. So, Falling Down really holds up excellently. It's about a man who just snaps in the beginning of the film. It's a hot, hazy day. He's stuck in traffic. He just got off of work. He's tired. And he gets out of his car, leaves it behind, and just goes on an odyssey, an exodus of finding himself, finding himself through malcontent with the society that he's living in. Again, something that I could relate to quite a bit, things that I've written about in some of my own stories. So I really resonate with Falling Down. It's got a tragic story, a tragic ending. I love it. I think Michael Douglas is perfect in this role. One of his best roles. He was on fire in the 90s, in my opinion, with that and The Game and a lot of cool flicks. Either way, that is Falling Down. Love Falling Down. Still holds up remarkably well. Falling Down. And my last honorable mention is a film that I don't own in any capacity. That is crazy. At least I don't think I do. Maybe I've picked it up recently. Something tells me I have picked it up recently, but I have a box full of stuff that I need to go through with you guys. So I'm not sure that I own it. I don't think I do. Groundhog Day is my last honorable mention. Groundhog Day, what can I say about it? It was a groundbreaking film in terms of its narrative style, its narrative structure, where our main character, Bill Murray, is living the same day over and over again, and he's able to change the outcome of the day after a lot of experimenting with suicide. He realizes that when you have, it's sort of like Live, Die, Repeat. It's very similar. There's a line in Live, Die, Repeat that says, when you have the technology to know what the future is like, then you could change the future. And Bill Murray learns this through the story, and it's really a beautiful romance between him and Andie MacDowell, and just them falling in love over and over, or not falling in love, or just missing falling in love. And it's a really great romantic comedy, and I don't like many romantic comedies, to be honest, but the 80s really got them right. They weren't too mushy and wishy-washy. I thought Groundhog Day was the perfect amalgam of romance and comedy, and it's just a great story. Ivan Reitman directed. It's been replicated. I saw a film this year called Boss Level that I loved. Actually, that was basically an action movie style of Groundhog Day. Live, Die, Repeat, which is an action sci-fi movie kind of version of Groundhog Day. We've seen multiple versions of it. Happy Death Day, of course. So it's an idea that has resonated throughout cinema in its own little subgenre now. So I love Groundhog Day. I need to figure out if I own that movie and rewatch it. It's been too long. Groundhog Day. And now, what all of you have been waiting for, my top 10 from 1993. Get my VHS stand here. Let's dig in. Number 10. The film... Yep, the film that kicked off my obsession with old school anime. 70s, 80s, 90s. This, along with a couple other things like Gantz, and later, a little bit later, Akira, would help launch my love for that genre. And it's one of my favorites of all time now. My number 10 is Ninja Scroll, with this incredibly cool, shiny, holographic Ninja Scroll slipcover. I have watched Ninja Scroll dozens of times. It's just one of those, it's an experience. The story is simple. There's not much of a story. Ninja Scroll is a simple story about a wandering samurai, a ronin, named Jubei, who saves a young girl from this giant, like, rock monster creature who is so cool. The animation, the character design is unmatched. The action is some of the best in anime ever. Maybe ever, period. And he saves this young girl, and it sets off sort of a chain of events that a whole bunch of assassins sort of start coming after him, and the story sort of unfolds from there. But it's visceral. Like, I'm having a hard time describing it because it's non-stop, kinetic, 80-minute action movie from start to finish. There's very little exposition. What is there is perfectly rounding out the world and our characters. Again, the character design is incredible. The direction is perfect. Everything, this is like a perfect anime film. And it's from one of my favorite directors. I didn't know it at the time that I saw it. He would become one of my favorites. But Yoshiaki Kawajiri is one of my favorite directors of all time. He did Ninja Scroll. He did Cyber City Oedo, which I love even more. But Ninja Scroll is a classic. This is the gateway drug into anime for a lot of people, and it was for me when I was around 17 years old. A buddy that I was working with named Dwayne put me on to Ninja Scroll, and he was like, you love action movies, you're gonna love this. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about anime. Man, now anime is one of my favorite genres, especially 80s and 90s stuff. Ninja Scroll is my number 10. It's badass to the core. Hell yeah, Ninja Scroll. Next up is a film that I'm not sure too many of you are going to know about. Growing up in the metropolitan area, Stamford, Connecticut, Italian culture, Italian-American culture was all around me. I'm Italian-American myself, Irish and Italian, and a lot of my family and friends were Italian-American, so as a kid, I resonated towards gangster movies, Italian-American gangster movies, and just movies that took place in inner cities that dealt with Irish mob and Italian mobs. Just, I felt a connection to it because that was my heritage. I liked it for glorification reasons, but now I look at mob movies a little differently, and I love them equally. But my number 9 is A Bronx Tale. This movie is so fucking underrated. Robert De Niro's directorial debut, I think he only went on to do a couple other films, maybe one other, The Good Shepherd. But A Bronx Tale was his directorial debut, and he knocks it out of the park. He plays a father, an Italian-American father in New York who has a young son he's raising on his own. He's a good father. He works hard. He's a blue-collar guy. He drives a bus. But his son, Calogero, starts getting into some shit on the streets. He meets a mobster, one of the big mobsters in town, played by Chaz Palminteri, who I forget the name of the mobster. And this mobster, Palminteri, sort of takes Calogero under his wing. There's a lot going on in this movie. It takes place during a time of racial tension, and Calogero sparks up a friendship and a romance, a young romance with this young black girl. And so there's a lot of layers to this movie. There's a lot going on. It's a period piece. It's a time period piece for sure. And it's really a film about a father and a son finding, you know, a father trying to save his son from the street. He's doing everything he can. And I'm actually getting emotional right now. And since my father died earlier this year, you know, movies about father and sons really hit me, usually, because I have an interesting relationship with my father. I did. And, you know, so this movie really hits home with me. All of the themes just connect with me. It's got tense moments where you just really feel for your characters. That's the thing. It's a character piece through and through. And all of these characters are well-defined and well-written and excellently performed by their performers. I just love this movie. A Bronx Tale does have a Blu-ray, I believe, in another country. I gotta pick it up because it's one of my favorites of all time, really, and definitely one of my favorites from '93. That is A Bronx Tale, my number 9. All right, my number 8 is another film. This one I didn't see till I was around 13, but it was one of the first Tarantino stories I had witnessed on the big screen. I had watched Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, of course, and then I found out that he wrote a little movie called True Romance, which is in this set, which is kind of hard to find now, because True Romance, I think, is still pretty hard to find out of print. Either way, True Romance blew me away in terms of narrative and writing and character work, and really was one of those films that made me want to write stories, and and I did quite a bit when I was in my teens. I wrote stories about hitmen. I wrote stories about things that I had no idea about as a teenager, right? But I knew I loved the pulpiness of True Romance and the way that Tarantino was writing his stories and his characters and how fleshed out and full his movies felt, his characters felt. Now, this is a Tarantino written movie. It's a script by Tarantino, but Tony Scott directed it. So you have to give the credit to Tony Scott for the direction, because god damn, he turned that Tarantino script into something that is just beyond words. I would have loved to see Tarantino do this movie at some point in his career, maybe later on, but I'm glad Tony Scott did it. It's my favorite Tony Scott film. I'm pretty confident. I haven't thought about that much, but it's just a great movie that I haven't even talked about the plot, really. It's about a guy played by Christian Slater named Clarence. It's been a while, so I may get some of the details wrong. And Patricia Arquette, who are just sort of a Bonnie and Clyde sort of couple, you know, They become petty criminals, and they're on this road trip, and they're getting way in over their head, and they're meeting all these colorful characters, from Christopher Walken to Vincent D'Onofrio to not Vincent D'Onofrio, sorry, James Gandolfini. Just so many great character actors in this. It's a who's who from 1993. Man, True Romance is such a great ride. It's a fun ride. It's poignant. It's funny. It's sad. It's got a great action scene at the end. True Romance, one of the best Tarantino stories, period. I strongly believe that. True Romance, my number 8. My number 7 is a film I've already mentioned in this video. That is Last Action Hero. The greatest deconstruction of action films ever. Specifically 80s action films. The muscle-bound, machismo action films from the 80s that we all love. From Cannon, Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris, Stallone, I can go on and on. It's one of the best action movies of the 90s, hands down. This movie is so goddamn smart. The first 2 acts are perfection. It's the third act that slows down a little bit for me when it gets to the real world. I still love it. I still think it sticks the landing pretty well. I just think the first 2 acts are deconstruction beautiness. I mean, if you want to learn how to deconstruct a genre, watch the first 2 acts of Last Action Hero. I mean, everything about it, from the way the character acts, the way, you know, the dialogue, the way the action plays out in this world inside of the screen that our young protagonist enters. And it's just a movie about movie magic. And any kid who grew up loving movies is going to connect with this movie, because it's about kids loving movies. It's about retaining that youth. And it's also a masterful deconstruction of the genre. So I love The Last Action Hero. Schwarzenegger is perfect in this role, parodying himself. And like Demolition Man, they both sort of mark the end of an era of action films. 80s action films with, one guy taking on armies of people. This is when things started getting a little bit more realistic in action. And Last Action Hero and Demolition Man had their finger on the pulse in terms of the way that they were directed and written, and they understood that that era was gone. And man, did it go out with a bang with Demolition Man and Last Action Hero, my number 7. Alright, next up, I'm going to try to hold back the tears on this one. Not many movies make me feel like a kid like Sandlot does. And I know I say that a lot. I know I say that a lot. I repeat myself a lot. I love every movie. Every movie in the world is my favorite movie ever. But this is truly one of the most nostalgic movies for me, hands down. And it's also an excellently made, family-friendly, coming-of-age story about a group of kids who live in a neighborhood and bond over baseball. New kid moves into the neighborhood, has no idea how to play baseball, but he feigns that he knows how to play baseball. And things get out of hand when he borrows a ball that was signed by the great Babe Ruth for a game of pickup baseball, and they hit it over the fence where there's a giant beast of a dog that they're all scared of. So this movie has everything. It has, for young boys at least, I connect with it because, first of all, I loved baseball. It just hits all the right beats. Baseball, it's got the scene where they go to the carnival where they're all puking on each other and they're all getting sick. It's got the scene at the pool where, the young boy's lusting over an older woman, an older girl. All things that young boys could relate to. Whether you like it or not. Even the idea of the scary neighbor in the neighborhood. I had one. We all had one. And it does such a good job sort of expressing the child's imagination to its audience and how children view things. It's really a movie that's expertly done through the eyes of the children by a group of adults, right? And of course the children actors. But the people that made this film, especially the director, who I gotta shout out, David Mickey Evans, really understood, really remembered what it was like to be a kid and view the world through those eyes. And this movie, anytime I want to go back to my youth, this is the movie I do to go back to my youth. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. I've seen it in theaters recently, and it was a wonderful experience. Well, not recently, a couple years ago. I've seen it countless times. It was one of my favorites growing up. I could go on and on about The Sandlot. You guys know this movie. It's more than baseball. It's a story about growing up, and I'm gonna love it forever. Sandlot, my number 6. My number 5 is a weird one. Well, it's not a weird one. It's a weird one to place on a top 10, because it's one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never felt so much watching a movie. I mean, there are a couple handfuls of movies, maybe Sandlot is one of them, honestly, that makes me feel a certain way. Sandlot's a little different than this, but that is Schindler's List, my number 5. This movie is beyond movie. It's transcendent. Liam Neeson in a role that should be talked about more. A reserved role of Oskar Schindler, who is setting out, risking his life, courageously trying to save Jewish lives during the Holocaust, smuggle Jews out of the camps. And it's such a powerful movie, directed by Steven Spielberg. Again, I'm getting choked up. It's a black and white film. He shot it in black and white, and I'm so glad he did. Something about the starkness of black and white makes it all seem so hopeless. And he uses color in such a brilliant way with the little girl in the red dress. Oh God, this film is hard to talk about. Jesus Christ. But it's hard to place on a top 10 because all of these films that I've talked about, I'd rather watch over Schindler's List. But I watch this once every 5 years or so because it is something that is so important to be reminded of, to know what happened so that we can avoid it in the future. This is one of the greatest movies of all time, and I can't really talk about it much more because I'm going to just cry because I'm a big baby. That is Schindler's List in this incredible special edition that I'm very glad to have. You know, I'll show you guys. It's got the girl in the red dress there. Just a beautiful movie that rips my heart out, stomps on it, and then sort of gives you a little hope at the end. Schindler's List. All right. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. My number 4 is a Van Damme film. Hard Target, baby. Hard Target, motherfucker. One of the best action movies of all time. One of my favorites from the 90s, of course. My favorite Van Damme film. Period. My favorite Van Damme film. There are a bunch that I love. Lionheart. In fact, a few on this set. Hard Target, Lionheart, Sudden Death. But none of them move me like Hard Target, baby. Hard Target is the shit. Directed by John Woo, the first film that he directed in America. And I'd still love to see his director's cut, which I hear is out there somewhere. I'd love to see a director's cut, but what we have here is a badass, chock full of action movie that clocks in at like an hour, 45 minutes, but just moves at a breakneck pace, Van Damme is in tip-top form here. I honestly think he's in his prime, despite him using a stunt double for his motorcycle scenes, and very obvious stunt double. It's like my only gripe with the movie. This film's got it all. It's got chases, it's got fisticuffs, it's got gunplay, it's got explosions, it's got fucking helicopters bombing a forest as John Claude's running through. It's got a Cajun... what's the diabetes guy? Wilford Brimley. A Cajun Wilford Brimley performance. It's got culture. It's got a badass villain, Lance Henriksen. I love the New Orleans Cajun flavor, and it works really well with Chance, Van Damme's character, because he's got that sort of accent that works as a Cajun accent. Hard Target's the shit. I love it. John Woo. Van Damme. My number 4. My number 3 is the greatest Die Hard ripoff of all time. And my favorite Stallone film. That's right. 93, my favorite Van Damme film, and my favorite Stallone film. And one of my favorite Schwarzenegger films, for that matter. You guys saw that coming. Cliffhanger. I don't know what it is about Cliffhanger. I just think it's a perfect action movie. Well, I do know what it is. I could talk about it forever. I just think it's a perfectly structured action film. That is definitely inspired by Die Hard. I mean, there's no question. It's Die Hard on a mountain. It was marketed that way. It is very Die Hard. But Gabe Walker, he ain't John McClane, but he's pretty close. He's badass. He doesn't have the one-liners. He doesn't have the self-conferences sort of thing, the self-discussion. But he holds the movie perfectly well. There are some incredible action sequences. One shot of him climbing the mountain, or cliffhanging, and it just dollies out, zooms out all the way to show this giant mountain he's scaling, which I believe he did almost all of his own stunts for. This film is on location. They were actually on a lot of mountains. I'm sure they had some sound stages, sure. But they were actually on mountains, and they don't make movies like this anymore. The behind-the-scenes shows like Rennie Harlan shooting all these crazy shots that look super dangerous. Rennie Harlan, by the way, I think this is his best movie. I am a big Rennie Harlan fan, especially of the 90s, but this, he just nails it. Perfect. Perfecto. John Lithgow is our villain here. He does a really good job as sort of a... James Bondy kind of villain. This also has Leon, who gets I always forget if it's an ice pick to the, or an icicle to the top of the head or under the chin. I always forget visually what the death is. Either way, Cliffhanger is an awesome movie. It's got an incredible introduction scene that kind of sets the standard, or sets the stage for Stallone's character and the events to come. Cliff Walker? What? Am I thinking of like Firewalker? Cliffhanger is the shit. I love this movie to death. I don't think it gets enough talk as one of the great action movies of all time. Cliffhanger. We've got number 2. Jurassic Park. I mean, how can you not include Jurassic Park on a list like this? I love this movie. I watch it at least once a year. It always sweeps me away. Up until... It was always a 4.5 out of 5 for me. But recently, my last couple watches, I bumped it up to a 5. I'm just like, I don't see anything wrong with this movie. It's perfectly paced, perfectly acted. The CG holds up at points excellently. Other points, not so great, like the Brontosauruses in the broad daylight. It was a bold move to light it that brightly, especially after how well Spielberg lit the T-Rex. But it doesn't look great. I will say that's a gripe, some of the CG. For the most part, though, the practical mixed with CG still holds up remarkably well. Jurassic Park is just a great story of humanity fucking with science, getting in way over their head. We don't know what we're messing with, and we create dinosaurs, and then they start eating people. Who knew? This is a movie. This is a cautionary tale. I love it. It's based on a Michael Crichton book that I have read. I prefer the movie, to be quite honest. The book is good, a little technical at points, but the movie just cuts out all the fat and brings it to you raw, and it's just so good. Jurassic Park is a wonder, a special effects monster of a film. It changed the industry quite literally. Jurassic Park is the shit. Number 2. Sam Neill, by the way. Sam motherfucking Neill. And my number 1, I hope, will surprise a lot of you. It's a film that I have discussed on the channel before, and I hope this encourages you guys to check this movie out. I've never seen a movie like this. and it's in a genre that I adore, that I've had quite the journey with over my years. Enough talking. Number 1 of 93 is Sonatine. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Sonatine? 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 Valentine? This movie changed the way I looked at gangster films. This was my first Takeshi Kitano film. Beat Takeshi, some of you may know him as. He's a stand-up comedian who got his start in Japan and then started directing, writing, and starring in incredibly brutal crime cop films from the late 80s into the 90s, and continues to make incredibly violent and gritty, visceral crime films. Either way, he did Violent Cop, Boiling Point, and his magnum opus, in my opinion, is Sonatine. Sonatine follows a group of gangsters led by Beat Takeshi, who are sent out to the coast of Japan to try to settle a gang dispute with a rival gang. So they go out there and they find that this gang, it's insignificant, the differences they have, the problems they have, and they get along decently, and they just kind of shoot the shit and just live life. It's just a very slice of life sort of gangster movie. And it flips gangster movies on its head because it follows these guys who are just like, is this even worth it? What are we even doing? You know, Takeshi Kitano's character is tired. He's tired of the gangster life. You could tell. It's all over his performance. And this encounter with this other group of gang members really makes them realize that all this is pretty trivial. And we should probably stop doing what we're doing. And it's violent. It's poignant. It's a deconstruction of the genre. It's a film only the Japanese could have made because it's a film about loyalty and honor. And you don't get gangster films like this in America. You just don't. Usually they're more glorification of gangsterdom, or at least a glorification which is meant to deliver a specific message to you about how these people are bad people. I think that's what Scorsese does really well, but Takeshi Kitano does something more introspective and something more heartfelt and human almost. And I'm not trying to say that Sonatine is better than anything Scorsese's ever done. It might be, to be honest. But Goodfellas is up there though. But Sonatine is just one of those movies that just completely changed the way I viewed a genre that I fell in love with when I was like 12, 13 years old. And it made me a lifelong fan of Takeshi Kitano, and I've only seen a few of his films, but Sonatine is one that resonates with me beyond belief. I love it. It makes me cry. It makes me laugh. It's just a wonderful gangster movie. So if you guys haven't seen the Yakuza classic Sonatine, it's one of the best gangster films of all time. Again, written, directed, and starring Takeshi Beat Kitano. It's one of the best films of all time, in my opinion. It's in my top 20. Sonatine is my number 1. And I gotta show you this edition here because it's a pieced together edition, actually. I ordered this from overseas, Nova, from Korea, South Korea. And it came and I realized it didn't have an English track for subtitles. And so I was like, that sucks. So I sold it, but I kept the slipcover. And then this was released, Region B, I think it was, or yeah, Region 2. And so I used this slipcover and this little book for this release. So these are actually 2 separate releases. This is the Nova release, and this is the Bandai visual release. But I kind of pieced it together for the ultimate edition of Sonatine. So, guys, check this out. I can't recommend it enough. It's one of my favorite films of all time, and my favorite film from 1993, that is Sonatine. I just want to thank you all for checking out this top 10 from 1993. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry it's been a long time coming for this video, but I plan to be more consistent with this series moving forward. I'd love to know what your favorite films from 1993 are. I'm sure there's some that I talked about that'll pop up on some of your lists. Hopefully I've put you on to some movies that you haven't heard or haven't seen, and hopefully they become some of your favorites as well. So feel free to leave those down in the comments below. We'll get a little discussion roll. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel and want to see more videos like it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. I also have a Patreon and t-shirts. Links are in the description below. Feel free to check that out if you so please. Anyway, guys, I will see you all next time. Bored Cyborg is out. See ya.